Good day, everybody. This is the Ecclesiarch here, back with some more Warforge. And today I'm here with none other than BJ the Brave. And welcome to episode 1 of FORGECAST, another series that me and BJ are going to be doing together. And BJ, would you mind telling us what this is all about?
What is this all? What is this madness?
Yeah,
Thanks,
indeed.
Lisa.
What's this
No,
crazy stuff about?
listen, I'm super excited because first and foremost, I'm a gamer, and when you join a hobby like this, you start to look for content and you look for the community, and I did exactly the same when I started. And we don't have a podcast, we don't have tons of content creators right now, so we were just basically batting forth the idea of basically a bit of discussion, a bit of roundtable discussion, somewhere where people can tune in to talk about the game, like what's the current state of the game, what's working, what are we playing, what decks is working for us, what changes do we want to see, how do we think the game could be better balanced, all of those types of conversations. So that's the sort of stuff we're going to dive into today. And just a quick I guess technical thing is, obviously we both have our own YouTube channel, so the way we're going to do this, guys, is we're going to have the first half of the podcast is going to be live on the Ecclesiarch's channel, and then at the end of it we'll give you like a link to come over to my channel where we're going to do the second half, so you get to see the full podcast episode.
All right. So, BJ, if there's not any more details that you would like to share, then I think we can get the show on the road.
Let's go. Let's go. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, Ecclesiarch, but I'm thinking it might be quite good for people who are just tuning in for the first time. Just give a bit of an intro, a little bit about our gaming backgrounds
That'll be
and
great.
whatnot, and then we can kind of get into a little bit about WARPFORGE and what we like about it.
Yeah, that would definitely be really good. And speaking of definitely, a lot of you might be new if you simply like started joining my channel after Warpforge, but some of you might know me from Definitely Not Your Physics Teacher, which was my previous channel, which I did like Horus Heresy Legions content for a couple of years, and then after the whole golf incident, you probably know what I mean, a lot of you, then I had to make a new channel. So here we are. But as for like my gaming experience per se, like I've been, I think, gaming since I was like very young. Like I remember some of my first games were like Warcraft 2 and 3, Heroes of Might and Magic and stuff like that, and I really used to enjoy, and I still enjoy actually, a lot of strategy games. That's like RTS is my probably my favorite genre together with RPG. But one day I came across Hearthstone. So this was like this was long ago, like maybe 10 years ago even. I remember it didn't even have its like second expansion yet or something, so it was really fun. I really enjoyed playing Hearthstone, and after some time like passed, I kind of stopped enjoying it, and then I stopped and I didn't really play card games anymore. But one day I just by chance came across Horus Heresy Legions, and like I just wanted to see what it was. I downloaded it, I gave it a shot, and it seems like really cool. Plus, it really, I could say that it really happened the same moment where I was starting to get into the whole Warhammer lore thing, because that was a time when my friend was kind of trying to get me into this hobby. And yeah, then I also found out that a couple of my friends were playing the game, and what happened was that I started looking for content, and I really couldn't find almost any content because I really wanted to play Magnus back in the day, and nobody was there like teaching anything on Magnus. And then I was like, okay, maybe I should do it if if there's like nothing there. And I remember my first thing was like I used to upload Magnus matches, then a deck guide, and it suddenly picked up. So it turned into a whole Horus Heresy Legions channel after a time. So that's a little bit of my story. So BJ, what about on your side?
Cool, man. No, I'm just laughing because when you were talking about your first ever gaming experience as being World of Warcraft, I'm thinking, God, I'm so old. My first ever gaming experiences was Pong on the Atari. So, I mean, I was like 4 years old. I got an Atari, and then I ended up getting a Sega Master System. I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember those bad boys. I had a game called Alex Kidd in Miracle World. So this is long before
Yeah, I got no
before
idea what that
Warcraft.
is.
And basically, back in the days of the 2D platformers. Yeah, I mean, so I've been gaming since before, but in terms of the CCGs, I mean, I like you, I also got into Hearthstone when that came about. Played it for a couple of years. I got a little bit. I always felt like it was just lacking a little bit of depth, Hearthstone. And then I remember I absolutely loved The Witcher 3. So I played that game. It's still to this day my favorite game of all time. And I loved Gwent, like many people, as a common tale. And then obviously they developed it as a standalone game. I was a pioneer in that game. I got in very early on in Gwent, and I've played that game. Well, I actually booted it up yesterday, so there we go. I've been playing Gwent for a long time, and but I did sort of, when they did the winter patch, anyone who plays Gwent will know what I'm talking about. A lot of people turned away from the game, and the kind of esports scene changed in it, and that's when I delved in some other games. So I've played the Elder Scrolls Legends, I played Mythgard, I played the Legends of Runeterra, which I think is, like, in terms of gameplay, it's a brilliant game, really good game, and it's got some good lore as well. Don't like the artwork very much, but yeah. So I've played a whole range of like collective card games. I got into Marvel Snap earlier this year, but kind of fell off from that. Kind of got a bit bored with it after. I think the first bit into Marvel Snap's really good. It's done really well for beginners, but then it's sort of like the novelty sort of falls off a little bit, and it's very kind of pay to win. So yeah, then the big thing I haven't said, the Ecclesiarch, is that I've been playing Warhammer 40k for a long time. I played it at uni. I managed a Games Workshop for 8 years. I worked for Games Workshop for 9.5 years, including at their head office. So I'm massively not just into the hobby, but into Games Workshop as well. Read all the Black Library novels, like super into the 40k lore and everything. So then, like, when this came along, I didn't really know it was coming out, and then I was like, wait a minute, there's a CCG, which is like my kind of game of choice, and the 40k lore. I'm like, this is heaven for me.
This is the one you've been looking for.
This is the one I've been looking for. So I dived right in, and here we are. Here we are. And it's, the game is very early on, right? So I know you've played Horus. What's it called?
Horus Heresy Legions, yeah.
The Horus Heresy Legions, which is, for those who don't know, Everguild, who make this game, this is their previous game, and obviously Horus Heresy is part of the kind of Games Workshop universe. So I think one of the things would be really good to kind of like kick off with and dive into right now is kind of like, we're here at the start of the game. What do we love about WARPFORGE? Like, what's really good about it? I can certainly compare it to other CCGs, and you can perhaps give us a little bit of comparison to Horus Heresy as well. And like, if anyone's new and they're diving in, they probably want to hear, like, what are some of the things that are really good that we really enjoy about this? So, do you want to kick us off? What's some of the stuff you really like?
I would say, like, there's a couple of things there's a couple of important things. Like, first is like what I enjoy in it as a standalone game, and what do I enjoy in it compared to other card games and compared to Legions, right? So here's the thing, like, the first thing that I really like about WARPFORGE, it starts with the good, as you said. I really like the artwork. I really like the whole music and the whole cinematic part of it. Honestly speaking, I also played a lot of Horus Heresy Legions, as you mentioned, and one thing that Everguild always does spot on, and you can really not take that away from them, is that they implement the lore and the flavor of the faction almost perfectly. Like, let me give you a very simple example. When you shoot with the orcs, have you noticed how the bullets go? Like, they go all around, right? Even though it's a card game. So they take those small details that really show what the orcs are, right? They just shoot, they just want it to be loud, they just want it to be fast, more Daka, and something happens, right? So that's kind of like how it actually happens in the lore. Like, the same thing was in Horus Heresy Legions. Night Lords had like that Night Lord vibe with Thousand Suns. It was the Thousand Sun vibe, and every faction like had something that really made you actually feel that you were playing this faction. That's just my opinion.
So, no, I think that's right. I got hit by a Repulsor Executioner earlier, and like the bullet holes in the card, it was like, and the audio design, the sound effect, it was like that is like a heavy bolter, like piercing into my card. It's captured so well.
Yeah, that on top of with also like with the voice acting and everything. Like, I remember like Horus Heresy Legions for the most part also had like beautiful voice acting. There were like one or two that were kind of memey and people were making fun of it. Like Master of the Sanguinary Guard had a very goofy voice, but most like Conrad's voice, for example, was perfect. Fulgrim's voice was perfect, and even here, like, I really love the whole voice acting that they got here. So yeah, that's one very good point for starters. The second one that I would say that I really like is that what I really like and don't like at the same time, but I would say I like it more than I don't like it. It's pretty complicated. Like, you got your ranged attack, you got your melee attack, you got like the forge, you got like the campaign track, your two different resources. There's a lot of things like a beginner really has to understand when they go in, because in Horus Heresy Legions you would just go in, there was just gold, there was gems, and you just went in the game and you just played. Here there's like a lot of things that you have to instantly get, but on the bright side that is very good because it does add a little more flavor to the game because there's a lot of things to do, right? So for some people it might actually be something that throws you off, but for me, I think it's pretty good. I do enjoy that there's a lot to do. And on top of that, I really do like how they implemented something that was long requested from their like previous card game, because there was like no duplicate protection, which meant you could get like same legendary cards over and over again. I even remember how I got 11 Leviathan Dreadnoughts for Blood Angels, and I was about to destroy my house because like 11, like seriously, I was going crazy. Like here, you can use it for the Forge, and that is actually pretty good because like example, I was missing only Gaskell lately, and instead of Gaskell I rolled another mech boy, but then I disenchanted the mech boy into the Forge and I got a wild card for Gaskell. So that whole system is very, very, very nice, and I really do like that overall. I think that it was a much necessary thing. However, a lot of people might say that just make dust like it was in Hearthstone and problem solved. I guess really depends on your point of view and what you really what really works for you. I guess I guess that is kind of individual. Plus, I think I do like that for people who are like hard grinders in every game, they can also grind the gems and just get the legendary from the shop. So it is much more beginner friendly than Horus Heresy Legions. Now, don't get me wrong, guys. I know that a lot of people now have mixed feelings because they're still loyal to Legions. I love Legions a lot, but one of the problems with Legions was that if you wanted to gather cards fast, you had to do event runs, like draft that is in here. And you had to be really good at that, because if you weren't good at that, you would be absolutely crushed. Also, considering that a lot of people, there was also a reroll option there that you could do for gems, which was like crystals. So if you came up against a good player who has been playing for a while, you automatically would lose as a new player, right? So it was unforgiving towards new players, in my opinion. Just this is just what I think. Right here, it's much easier to get stuff, which is I think a little bit better. It's more like Gwent, when you can actually get a faction you want to play pretty soon. So it took me like a week to get Necrons, no more. So it's pretty good.
Yeah.
What about you?
Did you do the premium campaign for the Necrons?
I did. I instantly tried out a premium campaign. I wanted to see the value, also make a video about it. And I would say, like, if you're planning to, as I said in my video about it, if you're planning to pay money in this game, the best value is premium campaigns, because
100%.
it's gonna get you basically the whole faction, almost the whole faction. It's much better than just buying gold and opening packs, which is very
100%.
random. Yeah.
100%. I've had a few people on my message me from the YouTube videos, and I keep saying, like, seriously, pick the faction you love, and if you do nothing else in terms of money, spend money on that. It cost me like £16. I actually got the 5 free packs with it because I got the web store bundle, which I don't think they do anymore, unfortunately, but I'm sure they'll do future deals. But either way, even the standard one, it's like £16. You will guarantee get 3 legendary cards, guaranteed. And that is all you need to make to get number 1 on ladder. Like if you want to have a meta deck and want to grind ladder, and I get that. Like I don't particularly love draft, although I think draft's pretty good in this game, but I don't particularly love draft. I get that totally. So spend the money on a premium, and I agree. I think it'll take about a week. It'll take 1 week of grinding out that campaign to get to the end, to get your legendaries, and you're away. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. In terms of, so some of the things I love, like, I mean, obviously, as I say, being a big Games Workshop fanboy for most of my life, really, obviously, it's super cool for me that the IP is what it is. I'm a big fan of CCGs. I'd play any CCG probably, but having the 40k lore, it's like icing on the cake. It's super good. The artwork is cool. And as you've already said, I love like the audio design and stuff like that. But also, anyone who's played 40k will know that, all of your miniatures, they have a weapon skill and a ballistic skill characteristic, and that's captured on the card. So what I love, like if you think about Hearthstone, you've got your attack and you've got your health, whereas here you've got your ballistic skill, which is essentially ranged attack, and you've got your weapon skill, which is essentially melee attack. And it adds this extra depth, because obviously we have some cards where a 6-drop has 6 ranged attack, but it only has 2 melee attack. So you can play around Obviously, that's strong when they're on the offensive, but it's weak defensively. So the way in which you evaluate cards has to differ a little bit in this game, because it's not like Hearthstone where there's just that one attack characteristic. It adds this extra layer, and I think as a foundational design, that's really good. That really enables us to kind of build out all sorts of interesting things. So I really love that, and just some of the general things. Like one of the things I really love about this starting point is the practice mode. So I spent a lot of time early on practicing. Like, I've had a few people saying to me, "Oh, it's impossible to win on ladder." It's like, why are you playing ladder? Dude, you're 4 days into the game. You don't have any cards. Stop playing ladder against the Ecclesiarch, who's been grinding this out since early beta and has got, don't be silly. So the thing is there's so much to learn when you start a new game like this. And trust me, a lot of CCGs don't do this. The fact that they give you guys 6 pre-built decks for each faction that are designed to show off the mechanics and allow you to use legendary cards that you don't have in your collection, that is massive. A lot of companies haven't done that because they've been scared that, well, if we give players access to a legendary card, then that'll lose some of the kind of gusto to want to collect them, which I think is nonsense, by the way. But the great thing with this build is that you can do that. And not only can you play that and play those decks and use those cards from day one, but they also count towards those dailies that the Ecclesiarch was just talking about, right? So as you were saying, the dailies are a really good way of like grinding out experience and then gaining resources to help you expand your collection. And being able to play awesome decks, like use awesome cards, that you don't have, is just utterly fantastic. I think the practice mode is one of the top, for a new person coming into the game, it's one of the best features about the game, 100%. What else did I have? I mean, you covered a lot of things that I really love, so I'm not going to repeat them. I think the one thing I would add is that I really like the I think that the basic factions are pretty good. I particularly liked when I started this kind of 2 months ago now. I particularly think Ultramarines and Orcs were well designed factions. And what I mean by that is I actually enjoyed playing those mechanics. Like some people in the Ultramarine meta last month said, "Oh, Ultramarines are sort of boring." I was like, I don't find them boring. I found it super interesting playing Ultramarines. I loved using the cards. I also liked the mirror matches. I thought they were some of the best matches I had last season were Ultramarine mirrors. They were always like super back and forth and close and tactical. And to me, that shows good design. The reason why I think the Orcs are a really well-designed faction is they're one of the few factions where right from the start, there are multiple different ways you can build Orcs effectively. Like, you can have themed factions, and the one that was lacking a little bit was the vehicle stuff. But since the balance update, they've kind of given the vehicles a little bit of a buff. So if you look at the Orc faction, there's multiple ways to build them. Whereas, like with Chaos, for example, I feel like it's a little bit lacking in kind of the types of deck that you can build. So for me, I think there's a few really good foundational like faction design there. And I love the card art as well. One thing about Gwent had amazing card art. And when you got a premium in Gwent, it was like a fully animated video. I mean, one that was quite famous was WARPFORGE, where he's kind of like burning someone's face with his like fireball. Oh my god, it was unbelievable. You're basically getting this cinematic movie on a card. It's like, you want that premium in your collection, and that's the only thing I'd kind of wish for about the card. The card art's brilliant, the art is fantastic, and I like the framing, the way the frames upgrade as you upgrade your cards. But I really wish they were animated premiums. That would be
maybe one day.
Maybe one day. Maybe one day.
When it comes to Gwent, one of the things about Gwent that was always like super for me was the whole music, the animation, the warlords that your heroes or whatever, they're just moving and doing stuff. That was like super. The only reason why I mean, I still casually play Gwent even like today, but the only reason why I managed to get more into the Everguild ones like Legions and WARPFORGE is that this game actually has something a little bit different from other card games that I've played, is that the warlords have attack. That means that they can attack without weapons. Like in Hearthstone, you had to equip a weapon to attack, and this kind of makes this game a little bit different. It becomes a little more aggressive. It becomes more difficult to control the board because you need to consider the fact that the enemy warlord can also take something out every single turn. And in Warpforge, it kind of changes because, and I'm not sure, like, I like it once again, but I like it and not like it at the same time. I'm not sure about it. Like, the thing that we got there is in Legions, you either would attack with your warlord or use their talent. Like, for example, with Horus, you could attack or use his talent to draw a card, like Kulgar does right now, right? But here you can also attack and also use it as a talent to draw a card, right? So you can do both at the same time. Now, I'm not sure how to feel about that. I don't know yet. I mean, I would be excited for both. Both of these ways have like some interesting parts because there you have to make a more critical choice. Here, what is that you can use artifice and some combos very in a very interesting way. So it's that is still yet to be seen if I prefer that or this, but it's still a very interesting change, I would say,
Yeah,
in
I see
that
what you're
sense.
saying there. That would provide an interesting tactical choice. I mean, I'd quite like to see the general 2-2 stat of Warlords change to 1-1. I think that would be quite a cool change because I think sometimes because like I'm really glad you brought this point up because you're right. When I first started playing, I was like, why is it I can't get any cards to stick? That was really noticeable coming from like Legends of Runeterra, coming from these other like Hearthstone-esque, like I said, Elder Scrolls Legends and games like that. Like one thing that was really obvious to me straight away was I cannot get any whatever I put down, it just gets removed. And I think one of the reasons is the fact that you've constantly got a warlord. You can never clear the board, right? Because there's always a warlord across from you that's got 2 attack, or if it's the swarm lord, it's got 3 attack. Then it's just standing, and you can't deal with that. It's always there to remove. So I'd quite like to see. I wonder whether 2 is too much, and whether like a 1-1, or your idea that you said with the heresy, that's quite kind of interesting, where you can use your talent or that. But I suppose in Warpforge, it does give you a little bit more. It gives the warlord more duality and purpose. But
Yeah,
you're right, in terms of trying to build a control deck, it's really, really difficult because you can never control the board. You can never clear the board because the enemy warlord's always there that can attack. So it makes a huge, huge difference. You're right.
there's also one other thing that I'm not sure how to feel about. Once again, I like it and not like it at the same time. It's the overtime mechanic. So this is the first game I've seen the classic type of card game with energy, and like I know that Gwent and Runeterra are a little different, but like this is the first, let's say, Hearthstone like game that I've played that goes over 10 energy. And goes over
True.
10 energy just because of the turn time, not because of something special used. And on one side, it's pretty good because it's fun for me, for sure. When I play games, it often saves my skin and it's fun. But at the same time, I'm not sure how good it is in the long run for the game because technically speaking, you might think that this kind of build maybe profits a control deck more. But in reality, I think that it does profit the aggro deck a little bit more because aggro decks usually do what? They waste all their resources just to finish the game very soon. But if their attack fails, they often then end up without cards and they kind of lose. But now, an aggro is still going to be fishing for more and more cards. But I think one very good thing that they did, I don't know if you've noticed this, BJ, but they've changed it. I don't remember when they changed it. Maybe it was like after the beta or something. But previously, the first player, if I'm not mistaken, of course, the first player was the one who would get 11 energy plus the 2 cards. Now,
Yeah.
the first player gets 11 energy first, but the second player gets the 2 cards. I think
Yeah.
that's a very nice change, actually.
It's a good change, a very good change. Yeah, because you card games. I remember Gwent. This was a huge problem in Gwent. Like whoever went first had such an advantage in Gwent,
Yeah,
and it's common in a lot of games. And how do you balance going second? I think this game does a decent job actually of that. I think that's another positive in terms of the what do we call them? Are they stratagems? The defense
yeah,
stratagems,
defense cards, I guess.
defense cards, yeah, and they're always better than the offense ones. And I think they do a good job with that. But I think you're right. The overtime mechanic is really interesting. It always feels good when you're running low on cards and then you hit overtime, right? Because you get more cards to play. But from a game design point of view, I think it might be a bad thing, right? Because as you've said, what you want to be able to do is design decks. That's a huge part of CCGs, is to build different types of decks. And I think you're right. What overtime does is it kind of this card doesn't benefit that much from card advantage, which has traditionally been a huge component of card games. Like, and it's very satisfying as well. Like, because you have to take damage and kind of almost play like a risky type of gameplay style in order to achieve card advantage in a game. But then the payoff is that now you've got more resources and you can overwhelm late game. That's very satisfying. It's very difficult to do. You know, because we've play tested some decks where I've tried to do like some late game chaos thing and it's just not worked, and it's so frustrating. It's why I started with Necrons, because I looked at Necrons and I thought, it reminded me of the green faction in Rune Terror, and I thought, I think I'm going to like a sort of late game control type of build. And that was the first campaign and the first deck I built. So, but I think you're spot on. I think the overtime it's interesting. I personally would like to see it ditched. It might also make you then think more about cards that draw cards, you know, because that's another thing. You just don't really need to play them half the time because you never run out.
Or there's another thing that they could do. There's one other thing that is very weird that they changed from Horus Heresy Legions. Maybe they changed it because of the overtime, I'm not sure, but there is no attrition damage when you run out of cards. Just like in Hearthstone, when you run out of cards and you want to draw, you would take attrition damage in Legions, like it was a thing. Like that first was 1, then 2, then 3, and so on. Here, there's no attrition damage. And I think that kind of, I think I dislike that in a way, because I think it's necessary to have that in a game, because when you run out of cards, there's like, you know, it's not only that you can play stuff, but there's also the stakes. And there was also like, it enabled a lot of fun plays, like Alpha Legion would force you to draw cards when you didn't have any, and you just got killed by attrition, which was really fun. Well, not for the opponent, but for you, I guess. So it was a fun mechanic. And in general, yeah, but I don't know how that would play into the overtime. But yeah, in any case, that's like something definitely I think they need to think about. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one other thing we probably haven't mentioned just before we move on, just in terms of like real strengths of the game, is we probably should talk about draft. Now, draft mode in this game, every single day, I believe, you get a free draft. I think that's correct.
That you do.
So, you know, that means that just from the perspective of just being able to play the game, you've always got something to do from as a beginner. And I would suggest playing draft and practice mode is the way to start the game, because it will help you learn the mechanics, will help you learn the game. One of the cool things that my friend actually recently just started the game last week, and he didn't realize this. He got his first 12 wins in draft. And I was like, oh, what legendary did you get? And he's like, I didn't get one. And I'm like, oh, you must have done the free draft, right? So if you are new to the game, there are two types of draft. There's a free draft, and there's the one that you pay 5. What are the
Blackstone.
Blackstone. So there's a currency called Blackstone in the game, and if you spend 5 Blackstone on a draft, you get better quality rewards. Now, as a newbie, you might not know that. It's not very obvious. It's not made very clear. But actually, if you get 12 wins with a Blackstone draft, you get a guaranteed legendary. And I think as a new player, that is an awesome thing to be spending your time doing in the first month, right? Blackstone drafts, you generally get 5 Blackstone as well if you get 12 wins. Not that 12 wins is easy. I'm not saying it's easy.
You should first learn the draft, and then you can accumulate the Blackstone and then just go for it.
Exactly. So I think that's really cool. I do think 12 is a little bit much. I'd quite like to see that reduced. I don't know how much I want to see it reduced. Maybe as low as 7, but certainly I think 12 is too much. At least 10. Like, I'd love to see it reduced to at least 10, but
I would say I agree in a way, and I'll tell you why I agree, though. Currently, I think that the draft in this game takes a long time. Like, you need to do like an hour or two. It really, really takes a long, long time, which can be exhausting, because in Legions, there was also the same thing, the event, and it took much less time than this, because Legions was also a fast-paced game as well. Like, they're doing some good work, like hasting up some animations, like Tyranid animations and stuff like that, so the game runs a little bit faster. But also the reason why Legions had 12, this is the thing that was there. You had a currency called ticket. You paid a ticket, you went into the draft. You also got a daily free draft as well, but you had a choice of spending 10 tickets instead of 1, and when you won, it would give you 10 chests, and each chest would contain some rewards like gold and cars and stuff like that, so it was 10 times the reward. So for example, winning 12 was difficult, but if you won, the rewards were usually pretty good. However, I really like how this gives a guaranteed legendary, because there, if you got unlucky, you could will 12 and still get nothing. pretty much. Well, not nothing, but you would not get any legendaries if you didn't get lucky, or you might get 5 if you're lucky. But so it was very RNG based. This is good that it gives you a guaranteed legendary, but since there's no option to get like 10 ticket runs here, maybe reducing it to 10 could be good, or maybe even 8. Yeah, I don't know. It could be much better in that sense because it takes a long time, honestly. So it's exhausting.
You can tell we're very passionate about the game because whatever we talk about, we can't help but kind of talk about ideas for improving the game and the things we want to see. And it's like, I know we're going to get into much more of that later, but we just naturally sort of, I just really want to have this. And the thing is, like, I know now from the CCGs, I've been playing for so many years, that the CCGs are never perfect and metas are never perfect. And there's always, a card or a deck that's OP and everyone moans about it. But in a way, part of the joy of a digital card game is that they are easily changed. And I think it's all about pressing refresh, isn't it? It's all about those updates and whatnot. So yeah, speaking of which, I thought what we're going to do now is just have a little chat about kind of what we've been playing at the minute. And then what we'll do is we'll switch over onto my channel where we're going to talk a little bit about the state of the meta and some of the changes that we'd like to see, not just to the game overall, but we're actually going to deep dive into the factions as well specifically and talk about things that some of the kind of nerfs and buffs that we'd really love to see. But yeah, I mean, right now, Ecclesiarch, we're here in mid-December. We obviously had the big patch kind of was it early last week that we had that kind of nerfed the Ultramarines and kind of gave a few buffs across the board. Yeah, what have you been playing since the patch then? How have you been playing the game?
That didn't really change for me much. There's only a few things that changed. I'll tell you how it really rolled. So when I started playing the game, I was mostly playing Necrons. I started getting Emotech like as soon as I could because that was what I played during early access. So that was the only one I really knew how to play. And
isn't it funny that we both started with Emotech?
I mean, Necrons really seem like very fun when you look at it from an outside perspective because it's like a pure control deck with Emotech, so it really does give you that very satisfactory feeling. And he's like a really good warlord on top. And after that, I also gathered like Ultramarines and Orcs. Now, the reason I gathered Ultramarines was because I noticed that it was a very good faction. So I also obviously wanted to get that. The second, because at that point, the ladder was only Necrons and Ultramarines. There was like literally nothing else. But I really didn't play a lot of Ultramarines because I kind of got bored of it real quick. But not because the faction is really boring, but it was like very generic because it was like very similar to some of the generic stuff from Horus Heresy Legions. Like, for example, let's say this was like, to me, it looked like a generic aggro faction. It just bashes you, and does a finisher. Like, there were some factions that used to play like that in Horus Heresy Legions. It wasn't really fun. So call it a Legions PTSD, but it is what it is. But after that, I got Gurk. And not Gurk, and I did get like that aggro deck that I've showed you, like the one that has maximum 4 energy, and then I played a lot of Gurk. It's crazy. And I played a lot of Gurk, and right now he's my top played warlord, I think, but that was like from previous season. I played a lot of aggro Gurk, and it was super fun. Plus, it's really easy to get a lot of games on factions on a warlord like that because it's games end too quickly. It was like Karn from Horus Heresy, like the game would end like 5 seconds. After that, like one of the factions that I really wanted to get and I gathered was the Tyranids. And I finally got the Swarm Lord like a little bit ago. And with Shumatsu's help, I made some very nice decks, and I've been playing a lot of Swarm Lord. I played like Swarm Lord this season until like 3,600 or something. And then I rolled a Gaskell. So I played like Gaskell for 1 or 2 days when I also made the video. It's super strong, like a little bit unfairly strong if you ask me. I played some Gaskell, and like after I kind of saw like all that there was to Gaskell, now I started gathering Chaos. I guess the faction that I enjoy the least is Eldar, probably. That's because I think
Oh, really?
yeah, I don't really know why. Like the whole Eldar and elves and like this typical elven aesthetic and gameplay style is always usually similar in many different games, and I find myself I usually enjoy elves and Eldar and stuff like that the least. Like the factions that are more focused on ranged attack and like flank and speed and stuff like that, I do find that it's not really that fun for me. It was the same when I used to play Battle for Middle Earth. I never liked playing elves. I did like the Scoia'tael in Gwent though, but once again, it was my least preferred faction.
Do you know, it's funny you say Scoia'tael, because I think that one of the things the Eldar have in common from a Gwent perspective is the Novigrad. What was the not Novigrad? What are they called?
Which one?
Ugh, the latest, the latest faction that they added.
Wait,
Not Nil.
which one here? Syndicate?
Yeah, Syndicate. Yeah, that's it. So in the Syndicate faction, they'd had this ability where you could bank coins, and then you could spend the coins later in the game.
Spirit
The same,
Stones.
the Spirit Stones, and it gives me lots of ideas from a design perspective. I think they can do a lot with that mechanic.
Oh yeah.
You know, especially when you think lore-wise, it's like the soul of the Spirit Stone is like the soul, isn't it, of the Eldar, essentially carrying forward. So you can think about a bit like with where Necrons die and they leave a remnant. You can think about like when they die, are there certain things like, for example, is there a spell that when it's making use of the graveyard, basically, so when something's dead, when it's actually in your graveyard, it's doing something to the Spirit Stones. I think that's a really interesting
Yeah,
mechanic.
graveyard, like graveyard gameplay. That would be fun.
Yeah, exactly.
First,
So
they need to create a graveyard, though, which I really think they need to do. It's one of the most crucial things in card games to be able to open up the graveyard and see what your opponent has played. It's very, very necessary. Like they need to do that 100%.
that's another good one for things to improve. But yeah, I was surprised you didn't like the Eldar. I mean, I quite like the Eldar. It's a little bit unexplored. I've only just recently got the Jetbike Lord. It was like, what's he called? Zephyrblade.
Yeah.
So I've recently just got him. I want to try him more, but I quite like them. So you've mainly recently then you've mainly been on the kind of Tyranids and the Gazgul.
Yeah, Tyranids, I would say mostly like Tyranids for like 2-3 days I played Tyranids, then Gaskell for a day, and now I'm switching to Chaos because I almost have all the cards with them. I just need to unlock the legendary there, which I do hope is going to be Drachnian, because it's going to be, if it's going to be Drachnian, I'm going to craft the Possessed Champion. If it's going to be Possessed Champion, the other way around. I just hope it's not Iskandar Kaon or another like duplicate. And I'm really sad about like Kaon being kind of unplayable, because I like the character, I love the design, the voice acting, everything, but it's a it's not a good card.
No, it's a shame. It's a shame. So what are you liking about you? So you're saying you're playing the Tyranids the most. What do you like about the Tyranid? About the Tyranids, and where do you think they're at right now in terms of the
Yeah.
the current meta?
Yeah, I think that the Tyranids are underrated as hell. But I would say more like Swarmlord is underrated. I was the one of the people who really underrated Swarmlord. Like in my previous tier list, I kind of threw him into the C tier, but that was mainly because like I never really had trouble against Swarmlord because most people didn't play Swarmlord correctly. But then after it kind of popularized a little bit and we saw some good Swarmlord players, then I kind of understood that he's really good. I think that what I like about Tyranids is that they have a very fun mechanic, which is the basically the biomutations, you want to call it, or something, biomorphologies, and like let's call it mutations, like different organic mutations they can take on, like up bonus armor, stealth, like damage. It reminds me of a very good mechanic from Legions, which was a mutation for Ruinstorm demons. They would get like this mutation. You chose very different things, like you could make it more tanky, you could make it spell immune, you could make it invisible or not. No, not invisible. You could give it flank and stuff like that. Nah, there was no invisibility, I think. I messed that up. But anyway, I really do think that that kind of a mechanic is always fun because you're always making a choice. However, I would like to see more like you could say diversity in choices, because look at this. Whenever you're playing your Tyranid like enhancements, there's only like two that you usually use the most. It's either stealth or armor, right? Everything else is somewhat unnecessary because, yeah, sure, +2 attack is nice, +2 range attack is nice, but I'm never going to choose +2 attack on my Carnifex over the armor unless I have a very specific situation, in which case this would be better. So I would like to see some different stuff. Like I would like to see, for example, armor maybe flank instead of those attacks, and maybe one could be, let's say, camouflage or something like that. So you could really choose what you need defense against. You want to defend against the physical attack, you want to defend against like tactics, or do you just want to go on the offense and just go attack? So, or maybe you could have blast as a mutation. Just giving flat attack and range damage, I think, is not good. So that's one of the things that I would say.
And maybe even some minuses. Like, yeah, you get +2, you get +1 armor, but you get -1 to your melee attack.
Yeah, that would be pretty good. That would be even super. And as for like where they are in the meta, I think that like when it comes to like if we talk about Swarmlord, I think that the only thing holding Swarmlord back a little bit is because that half the ladder is orcs right now. Like, forget that, and he can kind of beat almost anybody. He has a good matchup against Demotech. I think, well, not like super good, but it's pretty okay. He's good against the Ultramarines. He can deal with the Chaos pretty well. He can deal with the Eldar pretty well. So I think if orcs get hit with a nerf bat, Tyranids might rise on top after that. Say, like, I got this kind of feeling.
Yeah, I think they, in addition, they're the only faction that didn't get any buffs in the last patch. And I think Everguild are getting that feedback, and I think Tyranids are going to be super powerful going forward.
Yeah, there is a big chance. There is a big chance that they are going to do that.
Yeah.
And I just want to throw one thing right in there as one thing that I don't like, and I want... Hey, if EG is listening to this podcast, please take this into consideration. I do think that EG has done better balancing compared to Legions, that is. For example, with Necrons, I think that they did a pretty okay job. But there are some things that I would like to see not happen. Like, I know very well that buffing the orcs was a stupid idea. Stupid in a sense that not offending anybody, but in a sense that they were already in a nice place. Like, not fixing the issues that they had, like Green Horde and Makari, but on top of that, giving them a buff that already seems like exploitable. Like, as soon as I looked at the patch notes, you can see in my video, I'm saying, okay, this is going to be crazy, because Gaskell's going to be dropping 4 grots on turn 1, and kaboom. It's crazy. So it took me, and I'm not like a professional player or something. It took me just 1 second to realize that was broken. And it was broken. And I'm sure that EG realizes that as well. I do understand that this is like a kind of a tool that a lot of developers do to just market one faction. Like, okay, this faction is going to be, this month is going to be Orc month, then maybe it's Eldar month. Sure, that works. That can be fun, but it's really bad when it goes overboard, because other things really should be also playable. Like, they could, like, for example, fix Makari and Green Horde, and perhaps maybe make Green Horde cost a little more and so on. But more on that when we get to balance discussions. And I think what they need to do is they should balance the game to a state where all factions can be played. Sure, there can be a faction that is better. That's always how it is. It's impossible to have complete balance, but don't make like one faction crazy overpowered. Like, you cannot have a faction have 78% win rate when the pick rate is so high. It's crazy, right? As it was with the Ultramarines. So I think it's if they when the next patch hits, what they should avoid doing is they should not overbuff the Tyranids, and they should not destroy the orcs. Like with the Ultramarines, I think a better change would have been to not touch the Inceptor. It was unnecessary because that absolutely shut down their early game. And with Angels of Death, for example, instead of like killing the card, what they could do is they could still have 4 units, but the units could have lower HP so that they cannot be abused as a board stick, right? If you just drop it on the board without it being a reply card, you can just AoE and make it disappear, right? So I'd like to see them not make some factions super strong, because I'm afraid of a Tyranid meta that might drop next month. That's not something I want to see.
That was a beautiful rant about the meta and changes you want to see.
I know, right? It shows the collective emotions of the Warforged community.
I agree. I completely agree with everything you're saying there. We'll touch on that again. But yeah, I mean, just a little bit on what I've been playing, and then we'll get into some of the changes we'd really like to.
Maybe that in part 2, right?
Yeah. What the changes?
Yeah.
So shall I talk about my what I'm playing now, or should we do that in part two?
I believe that we could listen to your side of what you're playing, and then we could move
Yeah.
to the part two, which is going to be on
Cool.
BJ's channel, guys. So make sure
Sounds
after you watch this part, just go over there on the link and check out part two.
cool. Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting. So last season, I from a lore perspective, I'm not a huge orc fan. Like, of all of the factions when I got into the game, I thought I'm probably not going to play orcs because I know from like a collector's perspective that they're like, I believe different personalities have like a kind of almost like an intrinsic attraction or an appeal to certain factions, and that came out a little bit when you were talking about the elves and everything. And I've seen that a lot, right? I've developed communities in Games Workshops. I've seen lots of kids get into and adults get into the hobby, and that's something that you start to notice when you've seen it hundreds and hundreds of times. And for me, like, orcs were not one. But what was funny was, I think from the CCG side of me, like when I actually looked at the game mechanics, I actually really loved orcs. And I said so many times last season, orcs are my favorite faction. Like, they're about mid tier. I think last season they were probably the third best faction, or like somewhere around there anyway. They were definitely mid power level. They weren't bad, but they weren't anywhere near like the Ultramarines. And a few of the Orc players that I was messaging back and forth on Discord, like Cube Captain, for example, we were saying like we think Orcs are going to be really good next season. Like, and we weren't even talking about them getting buffs. We were just saying like if the Ultramarines get nerfed, which they are going to do, Orcs are in a really good position. And that was before the buffs. Then the buffs came out, and we were like, oh my god, this is insane. Like, they've pushed Orcs so far over the top now that they are insane. The big buff that needed to happen, from my perspective, for Orcs was that they needed to do something about the vehicles, because that's a really good archetype. It's a different way of playing the Orcs, and it was a real shame that they were super underpowered, quite frankly, given the blowback that they got from unstable. I mean, you know, if your opponent's clever and makes sure that the unstable vehicle's next to your warlord, if you played a pure vehicle deck over the course of the game, you could lose like half of your life, warlord's life, just to vehicles blowing up. And I mean, I really still don't think they've addressed the unstable mechanic properly. I mean, maybe something like, if they wanted to keep it as it is, maybe they could at least turn it down to like 0 to 2 instead of 0 to 3 damage. I think that wouldn't be a bad fix. But anyway, obviously I was enjoying the Orcs, and then they made the changes, and I've mainly played Orcs this season. I'd already collected the cards after the Necrons. I'd really lent into the collection, so I had a lot of the legendaries. And what I really think is interesting is, even though they're super powerful right now, what I've been enjoying in terms of my games is the variety of decks. Like, you even asked me, didn't you, before this podcast, oh, what deck have you been playing? I'm like, well, to be honest, dude, I climbed yesterday with 3 different Orc decks. Like, I think that's the strength of the Orc faction, and I definitely don't want to see that killed. I've played like control, old school face ripper decks successfully this season. I played with a Gorkanaut in my Gazgul deck. I've got like a mech deck that doesn't run any of the green hordes, and I had a Gorkanaut in it, and I was climbing with that yesterday. Then I've played this slightly more aggro version that kind of cuts all the mechs. I've been trying that. So there's like the sort of like mid-range tempo type body builds that you can play. There's so many different ways of playing the faction, and yeah, that's because they're strong, but it's also because they've got a variety of options that work. Whereas I feel like in some of the other factions they haven't. Similar to you, on top of the Orcs, I have been quietly collecting my Tyranids, and anyone who's collecting Tyranids will know that you really need to get to level 20 on the Forge. It's like such a milestone for the Tyranids. Is it called Disruption Pool? Digestion Pool.
Digestion, yeah.
Yeah, the Digestion Pool it's so critical. Like the Swarm Lord deck that Ecclesiarch was just talking about, guys. Like, if you don't like that gets like 50% better, that deck, when you've got the Digestion Pool. So I finally got that like late last week. But I've got to be honest, I've not fully committed to Tyranids yet. So it's one that I definitely want to get to. But I think it's like a faction that you really need to put the games in. Like, for example, I played a few games on stream the other night, and I missed Lethal, and I ended up losing the game. And everyone was like, "You missed Lethal," and I was like, "No, I didn't." And they're like, "Yeah, you did." And we actually went back on stream. We went back, and someone had taken a screen grab and sent it me. So I literally got the screen up live on stream, and we were all chatting about it. It was really good fun, actually. Like, in the chat, we were like pointing out like how I'd missed Lethal, and it wasn't straightforward. It was a little bit it was a little bit complex because like I had blast on a unit, and it meant that I had to attack. Because I attacked twice, the first blast would kill the thing that was next to the warlord, but then that would mean that the second blast would go on the warlord, and that's the bit I wasn't seeing. So like, yeah, it was really interesting. But it just shows that, you know, like I need to get the games in because I'm quite high on ladder. I'm like rank 12 at the minute, so trying to play up there with a faction I'm not familiar with is not going to work. I also built Chaos early this season. One of the factions I was really looking forward to after the nerfs and buffs was Chaos, and I'm a bit disappointed. I was a bit underwhelmed, and I don't feel like I've really found a deck that works well. I really wanted to play like a late game control build, and I've not been able to make that work. The best I kind of actually did was and I made a video about it, was actually a deck that was more just about targeting the orcs, just because there were so many people playing orcs, and actually Chaos have a few pretty good answers to orcs, some of the counter plays, but I've kind of dropped off that because a lot of the Gazgul decks now are not running the Green Horde, so actually that counterplay, it's not as often I'm sitting there in my hand and I'm just getting smashed to death by because I'm waiting for this card that doesn't exist in their deck. So I'm actually a little bit like a bit bummed out about Chaos, and I've kind of just gone back to like some different orc builds. The last one that I've just started playing again, you and I both started with Imatech, and I've just returned because I managed to get a wildcard legendary and crafted Oberon. So I really wanted that card, and the few games I've played so far, it's been working really well. He's a bit vulnerable in an orc meta, obviously, with the hard removal that orcs have got. But to be honest, I'm enjoying that deck, and it feels quite strong at the minute. Even though it received some nerfs, it's doing okay, and I'm enjoying playing that kind of late game control again. So yeah, that's mainly what I have been playing. So yeah, so what we're going to do now, guys, we're going to basically kind of end the part one there. Please, obviously, if you enjoy this type of thing and you want more of a regular podcast, let us know in the comments what you like about it, and any feedback that you've got for us. We really appreciate it. And what we're going to do now is we're going to hop over onto my channel, and we're going to pick up part 2, where we're basically going to talk a little bit about state of the meta, and we're going to go into some things some changes that we want to see in WARPFORGE going forward, and changes that we want to see specifically to each of the factions.
All right. All right, gentlemen, thank you for watching, and go over to BJ's channel. See you in the next one.